Hi, and welcome to another edition of Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry DeSilva. Well, periodically we do what we call a theme show. I'm like a regular Merv Griffin of the millennials here. But we've been working on some of these for a while, and we finally got what we think is the good combination of people to talk about the subject of motherhood. No, not, you're 6 months pregnant. I mean, it could be you're a mom, you're not a mom, you want kids, you don't want kids, you all had mothers. Perhaps you had two dads. I don't know. It depends. But we're here to spend the hour covering as much of the subject matter as we can, and we do so with a fine trio of panelists. We start with, and again, all returning guests, by the way, which is always nice to have them come back. Joining us from California on a landline, Alexis Hunter, a former actress, model, author of Joy Lansing, A Body to Die For, the book which chronicles the last 4 years of actress Joy Lansing's fascinating life. Joy was not only her friend, lover, and of course then now author of that book. And that is published by Bear Manor Media. Alexis, how are you?
I'm doing great, Larry. How are you? It's so nice to be back with you.
Always a pleasure, always a pleasure. And joining us, and Alexis is joining us from California. And also joining us from California, we have Carol Teitelbaum. Carol is a licensed therapist since 1985, therapist offering individual, couple, family therapy, traumatic events from abuse, illness, accidents, natural disaster, difficult life issues such as addictions, relationship problems, low self-esteem, and so much more. And equally as important, she's the co-author, along with her husband Robert, of Hiding in Plain Sight, a prequel to Frogs and Snails and Mobster Tales, her husband Robert's follow-up story of his own childhood abuse and survival. Growing up in the shadow of Al Capone, and Robert's own story of survival, as well as the depth of the mob's influence on American culture in the first half of the 20th century. Carol, welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Very well. Thanks for joining us. And joining us from Arizona, country recording artist and songwriter Sherry Rowe, also a past guest. Sherry has played with performers and artists such as Winona Judd, Three Dog Night, Aaron Carter, Diamond Rio, and so many more. She combines classic country and bluegrass elements with a stellar lineup of Nashville players, and her recent single is Beach Town. Welcome, Sherry. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show again, Larry. Good to talk with you.
Absolutely. Now, when you think of motherhood, well, let's see, how about cleaning up vomit or enforcing curfews, helping out with homework, preparing kids for life's challenges? Motherhood isn't something that happens all at once. It's a day-to-day choice to show up for your family. And so how much time do you have? Well, we've got about an hour to try to cover this lengthy and certainly challenging topic. I'll start out with Alexis. Alexis, now, as far as your relationship status and or kids, divorced at one point, but overall, for the most part, single, and your kids are pretty much your cats, correct?
No, they're my dogs.
Oh, your dogs. I'm sorry. What are the cats?
That's a great thing. I have four dogs and a tortoise.
A tortoise. There we go. So that's the
cockatoo. Yes.
There you go. So that's your kids are, again, have feelings as well. They're just not your traditional when you think of children. But I totally get it.
Right. No braces, no college, no aggravation. It's perfect.
There you go. Carol, now you have at least a couple of children, right? How many children do you have?
Two children who are old.
Okay. Oh, so they're so she'll have to reach back to remember some of the things that we're going to talk about. And Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong. Sherry, very busy with her career at this point. You have not had any children, correct?
No, actually, I have two daughters.
Oh, you have two daughters. Look at this. How come this was not in the bio? Oh my goodness.
No.
I feel like such a fool. I said, well, this is someone who's going to look at it from the angle of not having any children. Okay, and your daughters, again, are they in pre-teenage years?
You know, they much older actually than that. They both got married last year.
Wow. Okay. See, and I thought Sherry was only like 21 years old. Look at that. Oh my. Okay. Very good. Very well preserved for her age. Okay. Very good. We'll run again, starting with Sherry. Place of birth, and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic. In other words, mother, father, how many sisters, where were you born?
So I was born in New Jersey, but we moved to Arizona when I was 2. So I was raised here in the desert Southwest. I have a brother and 2 sisters, and it was a beautiful life growing up here. My mom, her parents were from Poland, so we are of Polish descent, and so I grew up with lots of Polish traditions and cooking lots of family meals. And my mom is just an amazing, selfless, wonderful person. So I was really blessed to have her to demonstrate that motherly love to me here.
And Carol, now where were you raised? Again, immediate family, brothers, sisters, fill us in.
Yes, I was born at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, California, and I went to Fairfax High School. And I have an older brother who's 3.5 years older. My parents got divorced when I was 5, so my mom was trying to raise us, but she moved next door to my grandparents, so they had a big influence on my life growing up.
There you go. All right, and now Alexis, you're originally a Midwestern girl, or am I wrong on that too?
Oh, you're close. Well, it's close. You were close. I'm a Navy brat, so I was born at Bethesda Naval Hospital, and then while my dad was still in the service, we moved right after I was born to Hawaii and then the Philippines, and then my dad retired, and we moved back to where he was born, which was near Wichita, Kansas. And so I lived there for 10 years before moving to California.
My goodness, so you moved around quite a bit.
Yeah.
Now, so you must have gone to a lot of different schools, is that correct?
Not terribly, not terribly, because I was so little. I went to kindergarten in Hawaii and first grade in the Philippines, and then went to Catholic school in right near Wichita, a little town called Arkansas City, Kansas.
There you go.
Ark City. Yeah.
There you go. I want to share a story that we were talking before we went on air, a story that I heard this morning driving, doing errands, and I thought, wow, I said, this story would maybe fit in with this here. It was a story on the radio about a couple that, could not have children, and the young woman's best friend, who was already a mother, several children, made a decision and an offer to, and again, I'm repeating it the way it was said, to give her one of her fertile eggs, and then obviously whatever procedures took place, and therefore the couple that could not have children, that had tried with the different procedures, could not have a child, was able to give birth to a healthy baby girl. So interesting on a lot of levels, because I know someone said to me, well, that's great, but unfortunately that brings up a lot of legal problems because, and I said, really? Of course, legalities always get in the way of life, that perhaps there had to have been documents signed, because technically, and I don't know if this is a nationwide thing or by state, that person, even though she offered up the egg, the fertile egg, technically is still considered the mother. Am I correct on something like that, Carol? I throw that to you because you might know.
That's right. Usually there are papers signed that say they give up the right to that baby.
Right. So in other words, it had to be a document, best friend or no, because this way,
Yes.
if someone has regrets later on, they can't turn around and say, well, I want the baby, even though.
That's right.
Yeah. My guess is that the baby would probably be brought up with that woman as her godmother, and then hopefully they would tell that person later on. So I thought that was a pretty neat story. Again, there are some that may have issues with that, but again, I just thought that given a situation where a couple can't have a child, obviously besides adoption, whatever, that certainly is another way to go. So that's good.
It's so interesting. I had a client that felt her whole life that this wasn't her real family, even though they told her it was. And she didn't find out until she was 30 that it wasn't her actual father, her biological father. But she knew it intuitively.
And I've known people, again, that knew they were adopted and then found, at the late 30s, early 40s, that they had a whole other family, not so much in terms of the parents still being around, but had, brought up as an only child. And next thing you know, they find out they have, 3, 4, 5 siblings. So that's another interesting thing. And again, a lot of that pre-1964, if I'm not mistaken, at least here in the Northeast, babies sometimes were, quote, adopted, and I'm using the term loosely, and that really there was no record keeping of who was who. Now I think, in the 60s, they started making it a law that you had to at least know who the parents were, and then it's up to the individual person to decide whether they want to find out who the parent is. So,
I think that's really
yeah.
important.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We've got some quotes here to share with you as we go along with these fine folks. Quote, "One thing I know for sure, this motherhood thing is not for sissies." And I think, I think Sherry, amongst all our guests, will know this young lady, Jennifer Nettles, who, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't she of Sugarland? So,
Yeah.
So she obviously has had, one or more children, and quite a pretty much, spot-on statement.
Oh, yeah. I would have to agree. It's definitely the hardest job and the most important job I will ever do, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Now, a couple of things that we asked our guests, excuse me, to provide maybe some points to talk about. Carol, you brought up one for me, recreating family patterns. Touch on that a little bit, what you meant by that.
Well, if we look back on our family history, we often find that there's patterns that are developed. Like in Robert's family, there was a lot of secrets, and there was a lot of mistrust and gambling and womanizing. And so if you don't look at what the patterns are in your family, it's really easy to pass them on to your own children, especially if you didn't ever do any work on yourself. So whether it's jealousy or gambling or eating disorders or whatever it is, we got to look at what was passed down to us so that we can work on it and not give it to our children.
Sherry, is that something you can relate to at all? I mean, anything like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Growing up, my dad left when I was very young, and learning more about that side of my family, I didn't really know a whole lot when I was very young, and I've learned more as the years have gone by. And there was a lot of trouble there, a lot of distress, a lot of anger, drinking problems, a lot of issues. And when my dad left when I was very young, I rebelled. I was very angry. I was filled with fear, and just went down some really dark roads there for a little while when I was a teenager. And that leaves you with a lot of baggage in and of itself. So in raising my girls, I was always very honest about the things I had learned about where we have all come from. I was very honest about the mistakes that I have made along the way. I never tried to paint my story as being, picture perfect, so to speak. And I told them, you can choose this path, and most likely this will lead to this, but I can teach you a better way. And I felt like there was so much positivity that was gained from that, and my girls, thankfully, have chosen to walk a path that has helped them to become beautiful young women with very productive lives, finding their purpose and bringing kindness to others, and we're very blessed to be able to say that.
How about you, Alexis? Being a Navy brat, again, a lot of some upheaval certainly there. Any other things that maybe made an impression, maybe not in not so good of a way with you growing up?
Well, actually, it was when I was an adult. When my mother died, and I was cleaning out the house, I found papers, adoption papers, and a lot of legal papers. I found out that my father had other children that I wasn't aware of. I have 3 half siblings somewhere. And it was shocking to me, absolutely shocking, because my sister and I were told that my father had never married except my mother, and that was it. And so it was just like, what? I mean, well, my parents never really talked very much, but this was quite shocking to me.
For that time, and I would like to think it's a lot better. Carol, you're probably a better person to ask about this. Hopefully there's more communication, between parents and their children now. I mean, I think things are a little harder to hide than perhaps back in the day.
Well, I just spoke at a conference, and my topic was how cultural biases can create family secrets. So it's still happening today. It just depends on the culture that you grow up in. There's many cultures that still don't allow their children to talk about certain things, or they don't share things, or they're not allowed to talk to strangers about them, like a therapist, or go get help. It's seen as weak, or you don't share family secrets, or air the dirty laundry. So no, it's still happening.
And would I be wrong in saying that it's probably, in other words, more prevalent in men or boys that become men and than young ladies that become women, or are women a little bit more open about speaking up about their problems?
Women are generally more open, but again, it's a cultural issue. In some cultures for women, they're not allowed to say anything bad about their parents. So even if they come to therapy, they'll tell me, I can't talk about that because I don't want to disrespect my parents. So it's really difficult for them to get better if they can't tell the truth.
And now you're saying, in other words, these are people that you've encountered, in other words, as patients or at conferences. So in other words, these are not, you're not talking about other countries. You're talking about within our own country and would that be based on religious issues or religious preferences? Why would there be, I'm kind of surprised that in this day and age that they would still be hesitant to speak about something.
Well, it's more cultural. Like I had a client that was from Japanese descent. He was the first American Japanese descent, and his father was not allowed to talk about anything about his family. And so he tried to pass that down to his son, who came to therapy and wanted to change that for his future. And he worked really hard on it. But when his parents came into therapy, they were very angry at him for telling anything about their grandparents. And some Hispanic clients the same way. They're not allowed to disrespect their parents. So it's still happening today, and there's other cultures as well. Even though they live here, they still are going by their cultural beliefs.
Interesting.
And it's very damaging to their children, because children need to speak up. And some children are living in a house with 6 relatives, and they can't tell anyone because they're afraid they'll get kicked out of their house, or they'll get in trouble with the principal, or somebody will come remove them. So there's so many, we want to think things are better, but I'm in the trenches with people, and I see it in schools. We go speak at high schools and middle schools, and I see that it's really not better yet.
I turn to Alexis on this. Obviously, in your situation, being an open lesbian, coming out to your parents, again, a personal choice, but again, was that something that while your parents were alive that you shared with them, or did you never had that conversation?
No, I did not.
Okay.
My parents were very old school, and I knew from comments that they made about certain situations that it wouldn't go over very well. And they were very, very, very good people, very kind people, but very, very set in their ways. And they had that mindset that, the funny people were not acceptable. I mean, they tolerated, and I don't like the word tolerant, because you're forced into putting up with something you really don't care about. But so I knew that all I would do would be to hurt them. So there was no point. I can be authentic with my friends and in my life, but I didn't find it necessary to just, to lay that on them. But, I mean, every person has a choice as to what they do with their life as far as who they confide in and who they tell. And it just didn't work for me. I was happy just living a dual life with them. I mean, they meant Joy. They thought Joy was wonderful, but they thought we were just really good friends. So it was fine. It was fine. I didn't have to come out and bang the drum.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, did you find at any point maybe that you should speak to a therapist or speak to someone that, just to kind of, in effect, do what you're doing here, which is kind of, letting it out, venting, or did you find that, you kind of were able to kind of suppress or cope with it without having to go to a professional?
Well, I'm lucky. It really didn't bother me. It didn't matter to me one way or the other what they felt. I mean, they didn't need to know this part of my life. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, sexuality is a small, especially now, is a very small part of my life. It's who I am and what kind of person I am and how I treat other people, not who I sleep with.
Gotcha. Okay. We're doing a theme show on motherhood and all that's entailed with it to try to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. Joining us today, as you can see, no one's with me in studio. I must be something, my cologne or something. But and actually, that reminds me of a story about my own mother, and I'll share that in a minute. But joining us here via California, Arizona, we have a former actress, model, author Alexis Hunter joining us on the phone from California. Via Skype, Carol Teitelbaum, author, licensed therapist, and joining us as well on FaceTime, Sherry Rowe, a singer-songwriter, up-and-coming country star who has 2 kids that I didn't know about. So go figure. Go figure. That's the biggest secret that has come out of this so far. Let me tell you. Oh my goodness! All right, growing up, we'll start with Sherry. Besides your own mom, who was a film or TV mom that you admired and said, "Wow, I wish I could be like that," or that my mom would be like that, or maybe she was like that?
Oh man, gosh, I feel like I was always watching. I've always loved really old classic TV shows. So, I mean, I still love Mary Tyler Moore. On the Dick Van Dyke Show. Like, I feel like she was just so funny, and she spoke out. She had a mind of her own, and just so entertaining, and yet so loving and supportive. And so yeah, I thought she was pretty cool.
So Mary Tyler Moore, let's see, Laura Petrie, okay, with those slacks that were really the rage back in the early 60s. Yeah. So that was the one that she would pick as a mom she admired. Alexis, what about you?
Probably Donna Reed.
Yeah, Donna Reed show, former Oscar winner, and had a long
TV. So loving, just a real sweet person.
Used to like how she always had the lunches ready as they came down the stairs, ready to leave.
Mom.
Little peck on the cheek and everything else. Just as good as it gets, okay, to some people. How about you, Carol? You're a therapist. Maybe you're like, oh, forget all of those people. How about you? Who did you look at growing up and say, well, that reminds me of my mom, or maybe, I wish that was my mom?
Lucille Ball.
Okay, so someone who's...
I'm always saying that I'm channeling Lucy, because she was funny, adventurous, and always wanted to do something new, and that's very much like me. So that's who I would want for a mom.
There you go. I can picture you at the chocolate factory right now trying to pack all those chocolates. There you go. Or stomping grapes. Is that something you've done yet?
Funny.
That's something you've done. I got a million of them. Or maybe trapped in the shower as the water's rising with Vivian Vance. There you go. So now we know why Carol is the way she is. There you go. So that she let the cat out of the bag. Oh my goodness. Now let's see. Being a mother helps you to be the best version of yourself. Okay, that was a quote that Sherry gave me. Expound on that a little bit.
So I think, for me personally, and I understand, we've touched on the subject of, whether you've had kids or not. I think this is more of an attitude of heart. So I do believe that this can apply whether you've had children of your own, whether you've had children at all. But for me personally, I do believe that having kids has sort of forced me so many times in my life to put myself aside and to serve and to be less self-centered and less selfish. And so I feel like serving others and taking care of others and becoming more empathetic and being strong when I didn't necessarily feel strong, just finding solutions to problems, really putting aside self has helped me to really be someone who is able to give to the people around me, and that has flowed over, beyond my children and my own family, but into my community, and even as an entertainer, for me, it's so much about people and the relationship, and I really sincerely believe that being a mother has refined me and helped me to be the best version of myself.
Another point you wrote to me about was, and this kind of ties in with what you're saying, as an entertainer, that being a mother doesn't have to mean giving up on your dreams. Obviously, you didn't, but still, it must have been difficult, as I'm sure it was for Carol, especially because you guys were trying to further yourself and then obviously help people, performing, therapist-wise, and yet you're trying to juggle the household and the kids at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that physically, practically speaking, it's a very tough job. It's a lot to juggle. But I was touring right up until 6 weeks before I delivered my kids, and then when they were about 6 weeks old, we had them back out on the road. My husband plays bass in my band, and we have a big band, and we had a lot of, we bring a nanny with us along with the rest of the crew, and it was a lot to juggle, but I do believe that it greatly enriched my kids' lives, and I do believe, I was speaking this morning with someone in an interview, and he was referring to the idea of not having these different portions of your life separated, but having them overlap one another. And this idea of having to separate work from family and hobbies from work and all that, trying to find that place where they all intersect. And so for us, that was always a goal that we had.
How about you, Carol? Did you find that, again, obviously, I know it was a while ago, but still when you were having your children, again, were you, I'm getting the impression you might not have been a therapist at that point, but did you find whatever it was you were doing that you're trying to keep the household intact, you're trying to, get everything, in line, and at the same time you've got other responsibilities outside the house?
Well, I had my children really young at 18 and 20, so I was a baby myself. I didn't go to school and back to college until I was 30. So my children were 10 and 8 when I went back to college. And it was very difficult because I was working full-time and going to college and having a family. But the good thing that they got out of it is their love of reading and their love of education. So both of them got educated, both of them went to college, and it really helped their future career. They missed out on having me around as much as I would have liked to have been there, but it's a trade-off, needed to have something stable. And, from Robert's book, he went from career to career. So I felt I had to be the stable one and just continue on with a career all in one direction. And that's what I did.
Now, Alexis, when you were growing up, was your mom a stay-at-home mom, or did she work and you had people that kept an eye on you?
No, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was a very good mom. She went to work after she had an empty nest. When my sister and I left the house, then she went to work, and she loved doing that. But when I was a kid, my mom was there all day long. Fixed all the food, did everything.
So she was like Donna Reed then.
Yeah, she was, in a lot of respects.
And Sherry, what about your mom? Was she also a stay-at-home mom growing up?
She was. She was always there. I feel like, before school, after school, if we came home for lunch, she was there. And when, as I said earlier, my dad left when I was very young. He ended up returning to the family when I was an adult, which is a whole other story, a miracle. But my mom, even when my dad left, she ran a child care business out of our home. So she was still there, and she was always cooking and cleaning, and she really did try her best, even in, difficult circumstances. She was carrying a lot and going through a lot herself. She, to me, still is the ultimate example of sacrificial love for sure. So yes, she was always there.
It's funny, we talk about this particular aspect of motherhood, being a mom. It's an issue that every mother at some point in time grapples with, being present for your children, both emotionally and physically. There's a recent book, Being There, Why Prioritizing Motherhood is so important in the first year, why the first 3 years matter. This psychoanalyst, social worker, and a parenting guidance expert, a woman named Erica Komisar, made a compelling research-backed case for renewal focus on the mother-child connection that starts as early, and she emphasizes the importance of being present in your child's life from 0 to 3 years. So not just months, but basically in those first 36 months. And again, think about it. I mean, for any number of reasons, illness, or I don't even know how, maybe Carol can shed some light if someone is given up for adoption, or if there's a death, perhaps at childbirth. You never know. Carol, would you agree with what the author of that book says, the importance of those first 3 years?
Yes, I do, because attachment disorders can happen if there's not a strong bond between the mother and the child, but also the father and the child. Because the child needs to know that they're not going to be abandoned, that they're loved, that there's somebody there that's listening to them and talking to them and sharing with them and making faces and pointing at things and all the things that babies need to develop.
Now, we are here at Studio 411 speaking with three fine individuals about growing up with their moms, motherhood in general. Alexis Hunter joining us on the phone from California. Carol Teitelbaum, author, therapist, also joining us on Skype. And country singer, songwriter, say that 3 times, Sherry Rowe, joining us from Arizona. Another quote, "Motherhood is difficult and rewarding," Gloria Estefan. So again, there's a situation where, again, you brought it up earlier, Carol, again, and I have so many statistics that, we could spend 10 hours talking about it. A woman, a Latina woman that obviously had the means to provide for her children, obviously had a husband, but I'm sure you see this quite often, and perhaps some of you ladies, it sounds like Sherry may have experienced this to a different degree, where there is not a two-family household, again, but depending on the ethnic group, sometimes it can be more of an issue than we realize.
Absolutely. My mom was a stay-at-home mom in my early years, but I was kind of wishing she wasn't. She was very overprotective and never let me sleep over anybody's house or walk to school with my friends. So I was wishing she went to work. And then she did go to work when I was about 10 and became a hairdresser. So we spent many hours and hours hearing about the people that she worked on and the celebrities that she knew and all those things. She worked for Jean Chacove, which they made that movie Shampoo about with Warren Beatty. So she had a lot of stories about who was there, what they were doing, what they said, and I didn't really care about that, but she told me over and over again.
Sounds like she'd make a great guest on this show. got some great stories.
Not live anymore.
There you go.
But she would have.
Now, how about you, Alexis? Again, your dad was in the service at one point early on. Was that something where he was absent often?
No. This was early 50s. Actually, late 40s, early 50s. And and we were on the base, and so my dad was never missing. He was always there, which was wonderful. My dad was you're talking about motherhood, but my dad was more of a mother-father to me. He was Popsy, the sweet one. He was a great guy, and I was lucky to have him. He came home every night after work and spent the evening at home. So he was a great influence on my life.
Now, forgive me, I thought one of you said that they had only sisters. And every one of you had brothers in the household, or no?
Yes, I have a brother, and then I have another brother that I met later in life that I didn't know I had. So that was interesting. So yeah, I have two brothers.
Oh, so you actually had one that, again, was from your dad's other relationship?
Yeah, it's very similar. I don't know whether it was Carol or Alexis who mentioned that, but very similar to that story. I didn't find out until I was older that my dad actually had another family that we didn't know about.
And how was that? That brings up another dynamic. How was that in terms of integrating? Because sometimes kids, brothers and sisters that really didn't grow up with each other, sometimes there isn't that desire to kind of connect, or they do, but then there's no bond there. Is that prevalent in your case, or no?
We don't see each other as much as we'd like to because we don't live near one another, but there was a connection immediately. I think sometimes connections are formed over going through things that are very deep and even at times, emotionally troubling. And having been without my dad for many years growing up, and then having him come back into my life and having that relationship restored, and then finding out that I had a brother after that, my whole mentality was, he needs to know that he has a family. He needs to know, this brother, he needs to know that he has a father, that he has siblings. And I think that was just coming from that place of, me wanting to make sure he didn't feel the way I did when I felt lost without my dad. And I think based on that sense of wanting us to all have inclusion and love one another and kind of put the past behind us and let healing happen, I think that's what we built our bond on. So it was pretty special.
I just remembered I had to tell you ladies the story of, and this leads me to my next question, popular gifts that people, husbands, sons, daughters give their moms on Mother's Day. On mine, and again, it just stayed with me from the time I was a kid. Certain things you maybe forget or they kind of get lost in the shuffle. Chanel No. 5, that was what my mom wanted. She didn't care whether she just got one gift, and it could be any day of any year, but Mother's Day was Chanel No. 5. Alexis, how about you? Anything that not that you gave it every year, in some cases, maybe depending on where kind of status you came from, maybe the money was tight, but I'm saying what kind of Mother's Day gift do you remember of your mom that she either got from you or from someone else that really made an impression on you?
Her favorite was New York cheesecake.
New York cheesecake. There you go.
Yeah, she loved New York cheesecake, so I did that for her. Yeah, she loved that.
See, I love New York cheesecake, so I think if we could bring all these mothers back, it would be,
wouldn't that be great?
We'd have cheesecake with some Chanel, and I haven't even asked the other two yet. Carol, what about you? What about you?
Jean Nate.
Oh, so another perfume gal. Okay, very good.
Version of Chanel No. 5.
Absolutely. And how about you, Sherry? A gift that either you gave or that your mom liked, or maybe it was a one-time thing and she just said, wow, this is the best Mother's Day gift ever.
My mom was always big about moments, and so for us, she would love it when we would make her breakfast and bring it into her room in the morning. And she loves fresh flowers that she can plant. She didn't want, us to bring, if we brought cut flowers, she would love them, but she has a wonderful green thumb and loves nature. So we would try to get her a flower that she could plant in the ground and make her breakfast. And she loved when we made cards. And some of my earliest rhymes that I actually came up with, now I'm a songwriter, it's funny, but some of the earliest, I have some of the cards and she has them. And I was always like trying to write poetry when I was little about how she was just the best mom in the world. And she still has all of those, so that'll tell you that's what she wanted.
Nice, very nice. Another mother or motherhood quote. Motherhood quote has a very humanizing effect. Everything gets reduced to essentials. The Oscar-winning actress Meryl Streep brought that statement. I have an image here, and actually we have it in the control room if the guys can bring it up. We have a graphic, I think, that when you ladies see this, I think will be very good. It's called MOM, Master of Multitasking. Now, would you ladies say yourselves or your respective moms, we'll start with Alexis, that she was a master of multitasking?
Yeah, she was. She was able to do a whole bunch of things, and she was organized, kept things together for the family.
How about you, Carol?
I'm a multitasker, but my mom was not. She could only do one thing at a time.
Okay, but she did it well. But then again, in those days, maybe there wasn't the urgency. I think this is more of a, I don't know, in the last 30, 40 years, this whole concept of multitasking, you know, it's kind of like
she could find a way to watch her soap operas no matter where we were.
Oh, really? That's right. I remember that, too. That was, I know when I was growing up, it was like the era of, you know, moms used to make time for, like, the soap operas. I mean, they could have, like, you know, cards with the girls or shopping or the hair, but it all had to be coordinated. Not necessarily my mom, because my mom worked. At one point, I was the dreaded latchkey child, so that's a whole other. Oh, yeah, really. I when I was 8, I knew every bus route in the town, the city I grew up in Connecticut. So at 8 years old, now I probably, somebody would get locked up if I was wandering the streets, but that just shows you how I think now we're a little too much helicopterish, if you know what I mean. How about your mom, Sherry, a multitasker?
No, not really. I think my mom, now I am very much a multitasker. I feel like I'm always juggling a million things. And even when the girls were little, you know, they could be, if they were too noisy, there were times when I would have to, you know, go into a closet in a room to do a radio interview so that they couldn't hear the chatter in the background. And I feel like I still, to this day, I'm juggling a lot, but I still refer back to my mom when I'm feeling that way and sometimes overwhelmed, because she was the one, when life got really chaotic, she would say, let's go outside. And I can still, you know, I still hear her say to this day, you know, it's going to be all right. Just go outside, put your face to the sun, and take a deep breath. So she was always that one who sort of kept me grounded, and still does.
See, now that doesn't happen, because now it's like, don't go outside, play with your video game or your iPhone. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So that's part of the issue now. I had a guest on recently that talked about how kids don't go outside and play. They don't go out and get exercise. And I'm not saying all, but again, you know what I mean. It's become much more difficult to to kind of make that happen. According to several studies, see what you ladies think of this, or in the case of Carol and Sherry, if this would hold true. Mothers who give birth later in life, especially if they had their last child after the age of 33, have twice the odds of living to the age of 95. Now, Carol, did you have your last child at or after the age of 33?
No, 20.
Oh, 20, okay.
I was 20. I had my last child.
Okay, all right. Well, then we rule you out. Now, what about Sherry? Were you last child?
I had my girls much younger than that.
Much younger. Okay, so yeah. I'm putting you guys down for only 90 years of age. So okay, so yeah. So you know how they say you work third shift, you lose a lot of years off your life. Well, according to this study, I don't know where they're getting that. They're knocked off a few years for that. Is motherhood a sacrifice or a privilege? Alexis, from the mothers you've known, what would you say, sacrifice or a privilege?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I mean, I know in my mother's case, she really wasn't able to achieve. She wasn't able to experience her dreams. Everything was her family, and I know that she missed it. because she wasn't terribly happy at times. So I think it probably depends on the person, but I think it's a mixed bag.
How about you, Carol?
I think so too. I think that it's a privilege, and also that we don't own our children. We're just given them to raise for a certain amount of time, so they're not really ours. And it's a sacrifice to give up a lot of the things that you might want to do with your life. And sometimes women are able to have both, but there's always regrets that you have when you're working or pursuing a career and not spending time with your children. And sometimes spending time with your children, you have regrets of a career you didn't have. So it goes both ways.
Absolutely. Some of the worst mothers in movie history. Let's see now. Okay, I bet you there were a couple here I didn't know. Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate. So Anne Bancroft, I'm sure she was a better mom in real life. Margaret White, the character's name in the film Carrie. Again, I believe that was, I'm drawing a blank on who the character, the actress was. Fine actress. Oh, Piper Laurie played her in Carrie, the one with the candles all over the house, so that was scary. Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest, enough said. Aunt Petunia in Harry Potter. I did not ever see Harry Potter, so someone fill me in. Do we know Aunt Petunia? Apparently she was not a very good mother. The Queen Mother in Aliens, and Norma Bates in Psycho. So, and I didn't know that. Norman was her son, and Norma. So that could be part of the issue right there. I don't know for sure. So, oh my goodness. Let's see now. Someone I talked to recently said, not having kids, and I'll direct this at Alexis. Not having kids, are you a godmother? Or are you like an aunt to a child? In other words, an aunt maybe in name only. Is there, a young person at one point in your life that you were kind of like almost like a surrogate aunt or mother to?
Well, I have something new that's happening that is creating that for me. My book has become part of the curriculum at a local high school in their international baccalaureate program, and I'm speaking to the kids. And I want the association. I want to be able to help them. So to me, that is sort of like being a mom, and it's very fulfilling for me. So I'm very excited.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. That's terrific. The youngest mother in recorded history. Now this, I don't know, Carol, you're going to have to check on this for me, but was just 5 years and 7 months when she gave birth to a 6.5-pound boy by cesarean in Peru in 1939. So Carol is aghast. I don't know. That's talk about. I've heard about babies having babies, but that's about the craziest. The oldest mother in history, and I thought it was a lady. I thought it was either two. I thought it was either Brigitte Nielsen at 54, or there was a woman in Italy who was like in her 60s. But I am wrong on both counts. The oldest mother was a woman in India. She was 70 years old in 2008 when she gave birth to a baby girl following a controversial IVF treatment.
Wow.
So again, that's not something most 70-year-olds I know want to start having.
Was she carrying the baby for her daughter?
I don't know. I don't know. That's all it tells me. Yeah. But see, now how would that play out? Now, if she gave birth to the child, then legally, again, in India, it may be different. But then here, who would be the mother?
The mother officially, but the mother would be the mother.
Yeah,
growing up.
Right, and the daughter would be the sister then. Yeah. So okay, now
that would be like the country song "I'm My Own Grandpa,"
Your own grandpa. There you go. Sherry is going to have that on her next CD.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sherry just made a mental note. She's putting that on the next CD for sure. We got a quote here from Julie Andrews. I think birth and motherhood are not things that you're trained to do. You might have a good example on your own, but from your own mom, as she would say, the English say mom, but nobody teaches you how to be a really great mom. Sherry, what do you think of that quote?
I think, that's partially true. I think, having a great example definitely helps. Having a great support system around you helps. But I do believe that you can't ever be fully ready. You can't, you can try to prepare, but it's definitely a learned by doing thing as far as I'm concerned.
How about you, Carol?
Well, I had a very overprotective mother, so I tried really hard to give my children independence. And for my daughter, that wasn't what she wanted. So if we don't really listen to our children and find out what it is that they want, we can really miss the mark by doing what was the opposite of what we got.
And Alexis, how about you?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, okay, I'll take that as an answer.
All I can say is having puppies.
The only thing is they don't talk back quite the same way. But.
Yeah, no, it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same. So I really am not an expert in this.
Carol, you lead me into my next point is, again, you wrote down a note to me to the importance of growing your listening skills. So you meant as a mother to be a good listener to your children.
Right, they'll tell you what they need, but we're not always hearing what they're saying. We're hearing what we think they're saying. And then based on our own experience, we can rationalize and minimize and discard things and not take what they're saying seriously. And children know what they want, and they try to tell you, but they don't always get heard. So it's so important to listen, to reaffirm what they're saying, to mirror back what they're saying, and making sure that you're really hearing what it is that they're trying to tell you.
You agree with that, Sherry?
Absolutely. I think that that's a learning process for sure, and it's a learning process for motherhood, but it's also just there's a learning curve for relationships in general. And I think hearing what someone needs from you definitely is something that we need to be intentional about and pay attention. And yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Maybe a little less talking and jumping to conclusions and running things through the filters that we're conditioned to run them through, and just kind of stopping and truly hearing the other person's heart.
The average age of new moms today, ladies, is 25 years old versus 21 back in 1970. It sounds like in the case of Carol and Sherry that you both were more in that statistic that would apply more to the 70s in terms of being younger when you had your kids. Why do you think that 4-year later difference? We'll start with Carol. Why do you think that that is the case now? Millennials waiting longer to have children?
I think so. I think that they're wanting to get their life going first and getting some education and actually learning from their own moms, whatever they saw that growing up, what they didn't want. So they're making decisions now based on life today. And a lot of people go to the altar with their accountant, not just their clergy, because they're afraid of their financial aspects of once they get married, what is that going to mean? Will they be supported? Or for the man, will I have to give up all my income and all my whatever I've accumulated to this woman if our marriage doesn't work out? And they're seeing so much divorce, so it's really difficult to jump in and go, this is going to be a lifetime relationship. They don't know these days if it's going to last or not last.
Alexis, obviously, I know, having spoken to you at length in 1970, you were in that ballpark age, and at a couple of, at least one point that I'm aware of, you did get married. But again, fellow actresses, models, people that you knew back in those days that were in your age bracket, did you find that a lot of them waited to get married, or that they got married very young?
A lot of people that I knew waited. They waited, and a lot of my friends in my actually probably my mid-20s and later, a lot of my friends were also in a similar situation as I, and not worried about having children. So it's more of a different world. But,
Gotcha. How about you, Sherry? Can you relate more to that 70s statistic, or do you have a lot of friends and family that are waiting longer to have children?
seen both, and it could be a thing that is a sign of the times culturally, and I'm sure there are reasons for that. But in my case, in my experience, and in my circle, I see both. I see people having kids young and starting their lives young, and I see people waiting, and it could be for practical reasons to wait. Like Alexis or Carol was saying, about education and different plans for life. It could be experiencing some trouble growing up and really not sure whether they're ready to parent and take on that commitment and that responsibility. But I see both, and I think it really has so much to do with the person's own individual experience.
Just think, ladies, imagine this windfall. Stay-at-home moms, what they would be paid for in today's dollars, okay? In the business world, $138,646 is what a stay-at-home mom, so the experts claim that they're worth. So just count out that. We'll round it up to $140K. That's a nice piece of change, huh? There's those multitaskers we spoke about earlier. And that's something. I tell you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, as we wind down this hour, again, I can't thank these ladies enough for joining us. We start with our dear friend on the phone, Alexis Hunter. Her book, Joy Lansing, A Body to Die For. For more information, bearmanormedia.com. Alexis, thank you so much for taking some time to come and join us again. Always a pleasure.
It was great. Thanks so much, Larry.
Thank you. Carol Teitelbaum, licensed therapist, 1985. Big these days as a co-author along with her husband, Robert Teitelbaum, Hiding in Plain Sight, a prequel to Frogs, Snails, and Mobster Tales, both published by Teitelbaum Press. Carol, thank you for your insight, and we are glad you came back to join us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And Sherry Rowe, country recording artist and songwriter. Her new single is Beach Town, sherryrowe.com. Sherry, we look forward to hearing that song on a episode soon of Studio 411. We thank you for making time to join us as well.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Carol and Alexis, and thank you, Larry. It's always a pleasure. Great talking with y'all.
Likewise, same here. And we thank you for joining us here on this episode of Studio 411. Larry DeSilva is my name. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.